Hi, this is Ilana. So I finally finished watching The Americans, and wow, there's so much to talk about. I also watched the whole first season of Killing Eve, and it's so exciting that there are so many strong, complicated, atypical, non stereotypical female characters, complex female characters being written on some of these TV shows now. It's really quite exciting. There's a lot to get excited about. I had this moment actually when I was watching Killing Eve that I thought, oh, we've arrived somewhere. It was the scene where Eve is talking to a police sketch artist about what Villanelle looks like. And she's saying, well, her eyes, she's got this look which expresses her desires, her passions, her curiosity, all these things that drive her. And after she's talking about this for like 5 minutes, you see the sketch artist with a blank look on his face, and he hasn't done anything. He says, well, what about the shape of her face? Is it round or oval? So that tells us that we've arrived somewhere where we're no longer talking about women just based on their appearance, but actually we're talking about something else, about the things that drive women, about their interests, passions, curiosities. So there's a certain limitation to that, of course, which is that both Elizabeth in The Americans and Eve, Kerry Russell and Sandra Oh are gorgeous, and their beauty is talked about in those terms at certain key moments. So, for example, in the last season of The Americans, where she's on the run, they're about to be caught, and you see someone who knows what they look like in real life say, yes, she's the one with the amazing hair, like a Clairol commercial. And so at the end of the day, you have this really complex character who really is just someone with great hair. There's also a scene where Villanelle describes Eve that way also, where she says, yeah, she's the Asian woman with the amazing hair. So it's like, yeah, okay, we can write complex characters as long as they have great hair, is sort of the message. And what's interesting also with Elizabeth is that I really feel like that great hair thing is very out of character for her. Here's a woman who really despises all of what America is about. She's very into the hard-working Mother Russia. She idealizes that. She idealizes the hard work. And there's this one scene earlier on in the series where Philip says, "Don't you love America? Don't you love this life here? What about all those shoes?" Right? And Elizabeth doesn't answer. So there are those who will watch that and say, yeah, secretly she really loves all those shoes like all women do, kind of thing. But I was thinking something else. I was thinking, she's secretly rolling her eyes at him, like, oh my God, really? We're still just talking about women and shoes? You can't get past that? I can't be a better character than that. I really think to myself that if they were going to do the Elizabeth character right, she would not have long hair. I mean, oh my God, putting that long hair in those disguises all the time. She would never do that. She would have a buzz cut. What she would have, if I were doing this character, she would have a buzz cut, like no real hair, and she would wear a long hair Clairol wig to her regular life, to her life as suburban American mom. That would be her big disguise. The hair would be her first disguise. That long hair, I don't believe is really her. Also, like, oh my God, it would take like 2 hours to take care of that every morning. And really? She's going to like do all that? She's going to buy all that product? I don't see that in Elizabeth. Anyway, so on the one hand, we have these incredible characters in women. On the other hand, there's still a sort of can't get away from their looks thing. So what I want to say about these characters is a couple of things. First of all, I love what they're doing with women and evil, with women and good and evil, because it's really breaking down this whole stereotype that women are naturally good. And even though the stereotype that women are naturally good may help us sometimes in some ways, first of all, I don't believe that it's true. I don't believe that women are any more naturally good than men. I think women are acculturated as carers. We've been taught for generations, throughout centuries, throughout cultures, that we are the good ones, that we are responsible for men's morality. Men could go out to war and kill people, and it's our responsibility to be, constantly compassionate, and we putting ourselves last, and not thinking about ourselves, doormats effectively in many cases. But we're taught that about ourselves, and that rationale that women are naturally good is of course the same rationale that keeps women away from positions of power. You still have that here in Israel. You still have ultra-Orthodox politicians saying women are not allowed into politics, women are not allowed to run politics in certain Orthodox communities because, it destroys the woman's soul. Okay, so if politics destroys a woman's soul, it destroys a man's soul too, right? So this idea that, women are responsible for the morality while men can go and do whatever they want, that's a big problem. So the fact that they have women who are written as, killing people is helpful in the sense that it's breaking down stereotypes that hold women back. And also, I keep thinking about this article that my friend Josie Glausier-Kluger wrote about women in power. What do we know about women in power? When women are in power, does the world become a better place? So there's some evidence for that. The whole UN Resolution 1325, which shows that when women are seated around the table dealing with peace and security issues, there's more likely to be a peace agreement. And this has been true in lots of places in the world, Ireland and Nicaragua and the Philippines, and trying to do that in Israel too. I'm active in some of those movements because, first of all, we want women's voices. Women have perspectives. Women have experiences, yes. And there's some evidence to show that when women are around the table, good things happen. But what my friend Josie writes is that we actually don't have enough evidence to know for sure. And of course, everyone always brings up, Margaret Thatcher, for example. Was she so great? No, she was militaristic. And so, but does that prove anything? It doesn't actually prove anything because we don't know. So this whole idea that, women are naturally good, that doesn't work for me. And I'm sorry to all my feminist friends who feel differently, and I obviously respect your opinions and your views, and I understand why it's so tempting and sometimes helpful to say, well, women bring good things into the world by nature. But I'd rather not say by nature, I'd rather say by acculturation and socialization, because the second we start talking about how women's brains are a certain way, we get into a lot of trouble. No, I don't have a woman's brain or a girl's brain. I have a human brain and a human soul. My soul is not female. My brain is not female. My soul and my brain are human. Okay, so I really like that these characters are breaking all that down. It's really empowering. It's really fun to watch. And I think it's a really positive step, even if they're, assassins with good hair kind of thing. Another thing that I also think is interesting is what they're doing with sexuality. So Elizabeth in The Americans, for her, sex is power. And she has this scene towards the end where she's talking to her daughter about sex, and she finally breaks down and tells the truth. And she goes, what was sex for us? Nothing. We didn't have any of that. So she comes from a place where there were, sexuality wasn't even a thing, to a place where she's using her sexuality with enormous power. And we're sort of cheering her on for that, which is really unusual. But in some ways, that's revelation at the end is also very real, and it's a very real women's experience where women are not really given an opportunity to develop their own sexuality and end up just playing these games that were created by a world where men use and exploit women's bodies. So she's using that to her gain, and we're cheering her on for that. So that's interesting. And also that whole admission that, how she was brought up with, there was no such thing as sex, really. There was no sex as sex kind of thing. I thought that was really interesting. And I'm really curious how many women might relate to that, not just from Mother Russia, but from other cultures also, where women's sexuality isn't really a developed thing. I think also that in Killing Eve has some really, really surprising and interesting things to do with sexuality. So it could be, so you have this whole sexual tension between the assassin and the woman who's chasing her, which is crazy, which is why you love the show, because they're crazy. They do these insane things. And I love that we're rooting for two women who in our society would both be called totally insane, right? And they show that at the beginning. They show how like they're totally breaking all kinds of rules, and we're rooting for them. So that's also a really big thing for me, is showing crazy women, quote unquote crazy women. I love that so much. And I love that they're each crazy in their own way, and we smile at them and we root for them and we're cheering them on. And that is very healing for me, actually. To sort of say, okay, we're cheering on these women who are just completely iconoclast and do what they want to do. Within that sort of craziness, there's also this sexual tension between them, where Eve basically admits that she has a crush on Villanelle, and Villanelle is sexually obsessed with Eve. And there's all of this sexual tension around it. And yet it's not sexuality so much in the sense of who I'm going to have sex with. I think that the sexuality that they're really toying with, that the writers are toying with, is sexuality as passion. Eve doesn't really have a crush on Villanelle in the sense that I don't believe that Eve actually wants to sleep with Villanelle. I think that Eve is just brought alive by some of Villanelle's energy. Something about Villanelle's energy, how she is so smart and creative and energetic and driven. Something about all of that, about her whole personality, really excites Eve. And so the writers interpret that excitement as sexuality. And I really like that. It reminds me a lot of what my friend Melanie Landau, she writes so much about sexuality and what sexuality is for women. And sexuality isn't necessarily about who you're having sex with. Sexuality is about your relationship with your own passions. And this is something that women are so often deprived of. We're deprived of this language that allows us to have desire. You know, Michelle Fine has an article of Harvard. She has an article called The Missing Discourse of Desire. It's this, we're so often acculturated with an absence of what sexuality feels like in ourselves, what desire, passion feel like in ourselves. And so you have two characters in Killing Eve who are both sexually excitable, not by, you know, dressing a particular way for men, and not by having sex, by just being really exceptionally sexual beings. I find that really exciting to watch, really exciting and healing and repairing. Like there's a real repair in that, a repair of our sort of Western culture, not just Western culture, but a repair of how women are socialized into our own sexuality. So I think that's really interesting. Another bit that also really excites me is the issue of smart women. Because in all of these cases, in Elizabeth and in Eve and in Villanelle, these are all super smart women, like brilliantly smart. And you're seeing women who are smart and committed to something, putting all of their energy behind a thing that they're thinking about and they're believing in. And you see the complexity around that, how women's smartness is reacted to, how it's accepted or not so accepted by their surroundings, and what kind of struggles they have by being a woman with ideas and passions, ideas and goals and things that they want to do and things that they want to achieve, and how the world around them is or isn't able to deal with it. I especially loved, really my favorite character on Killing Eve is the daughter, Constantine's daughter. I think she has a name, but I'm sorry that I don't remember the name. Constantine's daughter is the most brilliant girl on the show. She speaks how many languages? A zillion languages, and is whip smart, understands things in a minute and doesn't hold back because, you know, she's just a kid. And so as kids do, they talk without, you know, necessarily being aware of the adult politics of how we talk. And she's called all through annoying. Her father says, wow, my daughter is so annoying. And Villanelle says, wow, she is so annoying. She's called the annoying girl because she is brilliant and speaks her mind. And at the end, the last scene you have with Villanelle and the daughter, where Villanelle says to Constantine, her father, she says, "Your daughter is so annoying. I really like her." I love that. I love that so much. I just love that so much. Okay, so so these are some really, really key conversations I feel like that come out from where we have culture that is taking women seriously. The one thing that is difficult for me in this genre, and by genre I mean this whole thing of rooting for the bad guy or the bad woman in this case, rooting for where we turn the cameras around and we focus the cameras and we have the audience root for the person who's doing some things that are morally evil. Slate had a really excellent article about this a couple of weeks ago when The Americans came out. This is what I think of as the Tony Soprano problem. So like everyone else, I love The Sopranos. Of course, The Sopranos, great storytelling. And you know, the idea of a mafioso sitting with his therapist is fantastic. But the Sopranos, and the Sopranos, I feel like really started this or brought this into the mainstream. This idea of taking a guy who is a bad guy. Tony Soprano is a really, really bad guy. He has killed tons of people for greed, totally about greed, totally about money for himself and his family or in his extended family. And yet the cameras turn and we want to feel sorry for him. Whether it's because of his mother, we're like, oh my God, this poor guy, look at his mother. Or I think the really more powerful argument for me is less about the psychology and more about culture. Again, culture is where I come from. You know, it's my training and it's what I'm most interested in. So for me, you know, I think about Tony Soprano as the guy who was acculturated, socialized into being the mafioso. It's everything he knew. It's how he was brought up. It's his entire surroundings. And that's why he's doing it. Not because he has, you know, a terrible mother. But the show wanted us to believe that he's doing it because he has a terrible mother. But what bothered me about The Sopranos when I was watching it then, and it still bothers me because of how it's stayed in television culture, is this idea of moral relativism. The Sopranos kept playing around with moral relativism. You know, they would like show Tony doing one thing and then someone who we thought was good doing something similar. So it's like, oh, you think Tony's so bad? Well, look at the rest of society, kind of thing. So it's a sort of, you know, the idea that there is no such thing as right and wrong and truth and not truth, that everything is sort of relative. So this is difficult for me because I believe that there is a such thing as right and wrong. And actually, you know, feminism has this conversation with moral relativism all the time since early on, since like the 40s and 50s. This is a famous story already that when feminist philosophers were banging down the doors to get into philosophy departments in the 40s and 50s that were all men at the time. Finally, you know, the all-male departments had no choice but to let women in. And the first thing they did when women started coming into philosophy departments is that certain men invented a new philosophy, which is postmodernism, right? Postmodernism, which basically says there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's no such thing as absolute right and wrong. There's no such thing as absolute truth. And that was their response to feminism. So here feminism comes and says, there is a such thing as right and wrong. Gender equality is a moral right. We need gender equality. That's not something that I'm willing to argue about. And then along come the, you know, veteran male philosophers and say, meh, what? Oh, absolute right and wrong. Who's to say what's right and wrong? Like that. So you can read about that, and Sarah Delamont writes about that, and Susan Muller-Okin in this book that I have over here is Multiculturalism Bad for Women. There's a whole bunch of really interesting articles in there about that, and Martha Nussbaum also does a really excellent treatment about absolute values and where feminism plays in that. In this book, Women and Human Development. It's really a must read about all of these questions. So this tension between feminism and moral relativism has been going on for a while. So, you know, but also even without the feminism, you know, I watched The Sopranos. I love Sopranos. I love Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is the same thing. Walter White is that bad hero we're bad fans. That's the term. To bad fans, meaning you're rooting for the bad guy. So these are bad guys that we're rooting for, and it's great television, but it's problematic, especially with Tony Soprano. It's very problematic. So these shows where you have women as killers, and we're rooting for the women, and not just women, it's also Philip and the Americans. We're rooting for the bad guys, so to speak, is a problematic genre. But I actually think, especially the Americans, I want to talk about the Americans for a second. I think the Americans is not exactly the same as what's going on in The Sopranos. I think that the Americans is doing something quite clever about this, because you're not absolutely rooting for Philip and Elizabeth. You're also rooting for Stan. Stan, who's the FBI agent who's chasing them, is also not the bad guy. He's also a good guy. You really like him. Everybody loves Stan. So they're doing something clever in forcing the viewer to root for both at the same time. But I think what really makes the Americans different from shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad is that it's unpacking something from the 1980s. There's something else going on here, which is not that we're saying, oh, you see, Philip and Elizabeth became bad people because of their mothers or their circumstances or stuff like that. They're saying Philip and Elizabeth are no worse than how we are, how Americans are, in the sense that in the 1980s, the idea of absolute right and wrong was used to justify a lot of really terrible things that we were doing. So there's all of that 1980s paraphernalia that really brings people like me, people who were brought up in the 1980s, we really see all that paraphernalia and we think, oh, what were we doing in the 1980s? And then you remember like how much we believed that anything Soviet was bad, anything American was good, anything communist was bad, anything democratic was good. There was this very sharp divide between good and evil. And so the Jennings are coming here to tell us that maybe we were wrong about that. And here, and they do it really well because it's true. It's true that we can't really say that everything that America stands for is good, that everything that we did was correct. So, but it's asking the question. It's asking the question about ourselves, putting it on ourselves to say to ourselves, what were we doing all along? Did we really know? Did we really know right from wrong? And so here's where I think that idea of multiculturalism, is where multiculturalism is helpful, where it moves the camera around. So now we're looking at it from the opposite side of the Iron Curtain, as it were, and where that's new, that's brand new for American television. So I think that's really interesting. In terms of Villanelle, I'm still not sure. I think Villanelle, we're still able to see Villanelle as pure evil. In her, for example, in the scene where she's talking to this therapist who's trying to evaluate her, you see that she's a complete psychopath, that she has no feelings and no emotions. So there's still remnants of that. So you're rooting for Villanelle. You want to like Villanelle. There's scenes where people are saying, I think you're a nice person. The daughter says, I think you're a good person. And you're thinking to yourself, what? Villanelle is a good person? How can that be? Right? So it's still playing with it. But the genre is still problematic. It's a problematic genre, and yet here I am loving these shows. And I'm really excited to see what Killing Eve is going to do with season 2. And now, speaking of women characters, the next show I'm watching is Mrs. Maisels. So I've watched 2 episodes of that, and her character is incredible, and I'm really enjoying that. So I would love to hear what you think. Tell me if you're watching the shows, and sorry for all the spoilers. See you. Bye.